Welcome to Come and See, your podcast for finding truth in a world of chaos. Brought to you by All for Jesus Living Waters Ministry. With host and founder Richard Case and co-host and retreat leader Kathy Ricconi. Jesus reminds us to watch for the signs of his return. Today we will explore further what we are seeing in our times that line up with what signs he said would indicate the potential of the end and his return. We will also discuss the practical meaning of this as we watch and as a remnant prepare as he so leads. And now your host, Richard Case.
Well, good morning, Kathy. This is End Times Friday. How are you doing today?
Good morning. Doing great, actually. Yeah.
How is? I know you've moved to this new studio. Tell us a little bit about why did you move and what's happening there? Because I know you got some cool stuff happening.
Yeah, lots going on there. But I did move to a new spot in our house anyway, new studio. Because my oldest son and his wife, you guys who have been following the podcast know Josh and Emily, They are officially moving to New Hampshire. He has taken a new position with Shaw that is a dream job for him. It's actually going to be selling in their turf side of things, which means he gets to call on all the coaches and sports fields and all of that, which also means he gets to go to a lot of games. So I think he's really looking forward to this new territory, but most of all, we are looking forward to having them back and living close by us. And so close for a little bit anyway, with the housing market as it is. They are moving into, we have a finished third floor. Our attic space is finished. And so it's a bit of an apartment anyway, because we had set it up for our exchange students that we had live with us over the years. And so we are just revamping it. That is where I had my studio, though, when nobody was up there. And so we're revamping it. We had turned it into a game room for a little bit. It's now turned into a little apartment for them where they're going to get to stay while they figure out where exactly they want to be, what a good location is for his territory, and hopefully watch the housing market correct a little bit as well. So exciting stuff. That's all going on at the same time that we are madly packing up Anna and getting her ready. When we're taping this, it is about a week and a half, not even a week and a half until we move her into the dorm. So exciting times, emotional times for sure, but exciting times.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be a fun experience. We just be praying for that for you. We've talked about we've been in this little mini series as we talked about the end times about the beast, and Daniel describes it, Revelation describes it. We know that there's players in the whole process. The beast is created by the harlot, and the beast isn't really known fully until the beginning of the tribulation, and it's one world government and one economic system, and the world,
and that is the beast.
Yes. That starts to be the system. And we talked last time about the rise of the Antichrist and the false prophet, which we'll get into a little bit more today. That the beast becomes synonymous, the Antichrist becomes synonymous with the beast, because it then becomes about him.
Right. And that's really about mid-trib that the two merge together.
As they're heading that direction, somewhere in that process, it says he has a voice. I believe that he actually starts persecuting the believers, not fully yet even in place, because remember last time it said there were 7. And he had the voice, and he was the one persecuting. So he's moving into that place. Right. And when we see that individual persecuting the remnant, we know, okay, there's the Antichrist. The rest of the world won't call him that, and they won't see him that, but that's what it is. So,
but we'll know the indicators. The prophecy says that is who it will be.
Right. So the beast is the system, one world government, and the harlot are the forces, the groups behind it, who are working the game, so to speak, to get it ready. And there are now known societies and peoples who are openly. It used to be pretty secret,
Right.
like the Rothschilds. Ever since really the 1800s, they've been working to gain control of the central banks, which they've gained.
Which they have, yes.
And for the purpose of one world government, and they knew it was economic, and they weren't doing it by power in terms of military power. They were doing it by economic power and gaining control of the economic power. And then there's Skull and Bones out of Yale, One World Government. There's Council for Foreign Relations, One World Government. George Soros, who's a multi-billionaire that is funding a lot of this. And then the World Economic Forum has really stepped to the front of this. So that's kind of the...
And pulled in leaders from everywhere. So that's where you're seeing it really culminate.
Yeah, and they are now, in a sense, they're the face of the movement, because now it's being referred, and what's happening, it's what WEF said or WEF did, and these other groups are not front and center like WEF is taken front and center with a stated goal of one world government. Okay, something just came out just a few days ago. The WEF published their goal of the world economic, what they call ecosystem. And that is that they said they want to become efficient and move away from environmental harm, which is a great cover, by the way.
Interesting.
And to digitize the entire world. So this is what they just came out. It just came out. What they call a global circular economy. And so think of, in their mind, it's everything is connected, and it's a circle, not a bunch of independent vectors. It's all tied together, and everything ties together, by the way, through a one world government. And it says a global circular economy produces no waste. And we can become highly efficient if we can run it that way instead of U.S. system, European system, Chinese system. They're not together, and they produce a lot of waste, so we're going to get it together. Secondly, it is necessary, in order to have a truly global circular economy, for every organization and business to become fully digital. So we have to move away from any form of manual process, and everything has to be tied together digitally, which will, by the way, implies banking, for example.
Right.
And even the coin or the currency.
I was going to say that definitely implies one world currency, right?
Yeah, will not be paper anymore. It'll be, or individual currencies. It'll be digital currency. And then it says, if we do this, we'll have a complete ability to manage supply chain and minimize environmental harm, and everybody's profits and competitiveness will improve if you join it. And so think about what COVID did, and still the supply chain has been disrupted.
Right.
And it's hard to get things. And so they're using that, And see, it's interesting.
To propel this forward.
One thing that's been interesting to me is, let's take automobiles, for example. And I know it has to do with parts and electronic parts, but they've been able to see this now for quite a while. What surprises me is literally no automobile company has stepped up to the point of actually supplying new cars at a rate that would be typical. So they come into dealers, 3, 4, 5, 6 a month. That's it.
Right. I was going to say it's still very much a shortage.
It's a shortage,
and buying a used car is crazy right now.
And so I think there's a purposeful movement to cause that struggle, so that then, look, if you do it this way, we'll be able to get back to normal, which is the motivation to do this way. So the digitization of it is really the primary thing. Okay, now and they're working on it, and they said we're gonna digitize everybody's businesses now throughout the world. That's their goal. Okay, yesterday, and this is coming right behind that statement, Canada and the WEF bring a digital ID system for everybody in Canada to operate and travel, and they said that Klaus Schwab, who's the head of WEF, made a statement. We're very proud of Canada taking the lead to digitize this aspect of it, and so and let me just tell you.
So what does this mean? What's that going to look like? For, just from a practical standpoint, what does that look like in Canada? What are they proposing?
Well, they're proposing that a digital ID. And what it means is that if you travel, and this would be credit cards for gas, it'll be being able to get on an airplane. It'll be going through toll booths and through customs. That every time that you exercise this, in order to be able to buy, which we're gonna talk about today, you have to have this digital ID to be able to do it. And if you don't have it, you can't travel, you can't buy gas, you can't go to hotels. And so they're doing it at the very base level of having this digital ID system, which then will track you, by the way.
Right. I was going to say then they would have tracking of everywhere and everything you do and everything you buy.
They'll be able to have it, and that in China, it says that China has created databases so that the addresses, family members, birth control, religious affiliations, hotel, flight, train records, biometrics, facial recognition, to be able to, you could have cameras that be able to track you, because they can tie that facial recognition, because you're going to have a facial ID, in part of your digitation, and they'll be able to observe you by cameras.
Right. Well, and isn't Amazon, didn't you send me an article about Amazon expanding their checkout process where you just wave your hand and it actually goes off your fingerprints,
goes
that
off
sort of
off
thing,
your
to check out instead of having to.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
So, but they're digitizing the ability now, so that I believe that is a testing, putting in place an element of what ultimately it's going to look like, which is what we call the mark of the beast, of the ability of through a digital system, which I believe, again, remember John says it was on their forehead and on their wrist. I think it's related to a cell phone that you put up to somebody's face, or you go up into, and you have to do identification, kind of like what you do. I don't know if you have on your computer, even if on your iPhone, if you want to open up your iPhone, it does it by facial recognition. And that's kind of what it is. And John saw it at the forehead, instead. I guess the mark is on their forehead, and it's on their wrist. So I think that with the watch, electronic watch, is that you put it up to the thing and you're identified. So I think that's the mark of the beast. So it's really interesting, as we're right in the middle of talking about this, that there's actual statements, actions, projects that are actually in place right now to do this very thing.
Right.
So now we can say, interesting that it's not, in a sense, it's not hypothetical anymore. It's actually getting set up. And so the question is this pushing closer to the time that this happens, or is it still a ways off, which it could be? But we can now physically see it, as opposed to speculating.
As the technology and the policies are coming into place that support all of this.
Yeah. And so last time we talked about the beast and then the rise of the Antichrist. Go to Revelation 13, And we'll talk a little bit more about the players here. So read 11 through 18, 13, 11
Sure.
through 18.
Then I saw another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb and spoke like a dragon. And he exercises all the authority of the first beast in his presence, and causes the earth and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. He performs great signs, so that he even makes fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. And he deceives those who dwell on the earth by those signs which he is granted to do in the sight of the beast, telling those who dwell on the earth to make an image to the beast who was wounded by the sword and lived. He was granted power to give breath to the image of the beast, and that the image of the beast should both speak and cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. He causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads, and that no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark of the name of the beast or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. His number is 666.
Okay. He says, now remember at this point, he's now associating the beast, the one world government, and the process now with an individual who is a person. And he says, remember when he says beast, he's talking about a force or a power that's against the work of God.
Okay.
So, we have a tendency to kind of lump it all together, and because he described it as, a bear and a lion and a leopard, and so we consider those to be beast, identifiable, but it's more of what's really behind it, that instead of it being of God, it's against God, and that's why it's called the beast.
Okay.
It's something that is trying to gain power and control against the work of God, against God himself and the people of God. So he says, I saw another beast come up, and he had two horns like a lamb and spoke like a dragon. Well, John uses lamb visualization to represent who? And he's been so far throughout Scripture in Revelation, whenever he talks about the lamb, who's he talking about?
Normally the lamb is about Jesus.
Jesus. Okay, so Christian Jesus, the life of a believer. And he said, I saw somebody that looked like the lamb. He appears as the lamb. So he is somebody who the world would consider to be Christian. And he represents, in statements, probably even that he would be a follower of God or a follower of Christ. I'm a Christian. Yet, he looked like a lamb, but he spoke like who? In verse,
like a dragon.
Like a dragon. The dragon is Satan.
Satan, right.
So that he's saying in essence, he's deceitful. He looks like a lamb, but he's not the lamb. Because he's not talking like a lamb. He's not talking the purity of God. He's talking deceit, and appears like an angel of light, but he's really deceitful. And he says that he exercises the authority of the primary beast, the system, and now the Antichrist. And he says he causes those that are on earth to worship the first beast because he has been apparently dead and resurrected, looks like it. And so basically he's supporting him as God, and he's giving credence to, yes, he is God. Now he's not saying, by the way, he's not saying he's Christ. And he even doesn't say he's the Lamb. He just says he's to be worshipped because he is God. So he kind of goes to morphing, and the Christian community of the world pretty much accepts that as, because they don't really focus on, well, wait a minute, how can we worship him if we're already called to worship Christ? Because Christ said, don't worship anything else but me.
Right.
So you would think there would be this, well, I can't do that because I'm not supposed to worship anybody but Jesus, and you're not even telling me it's Jesus. It's just worship this guy because he is God. Well, they willingly do it.
And then, so here's a question. So then non-believers, they decide to worship this after they haven't worshiped God this whole time.
Right.
Yeah. So, but they, for whatever reason, step into this.
And tie this together, because that's a great question. Why would they do that? Because they're not even bent toward worshiping anything.
Right. So really, maybe they are more in, this is where the privileges, where my comfort, my security, my safety is going to come from. So if that's what I have to do, I'll do it.
Yeah. So that.
But not necessarily a hard allegiance.
As a believer, we're often spoken of by the Scripture is, you are worshiping idols. Now we're believers, and we would say we're worshiping God. When are we considered? Yeah, but actually, you're worshiping idols.
Whenever we put anything ahead of Him.
So anything else, anything else. So we got to be careful there of the word worship. Doesn't mean, that I completely am sold out to that. It's that I consider that to be the most important thing in my life, and I put it first. And so, yes, that's the system. The system is beneficial to me. Sure, I worship, and the fact that he looks like he died and was resurrected, looks like he has power, and sure, I'll worship that because it's convenient for me to worship that. There's no reason not to. And then he says that he performs great signs, makes fire come down from heaven in the sight of all men. That'll be on TV. Deceives those who dwell on the earth by signs that he was granted to do in the sight of the beast. And he says, let's make an image of the beast. So the person now has literally an image, and likely because of the electronics, it's you could look at it as a hologram. It's something that is visible, and the image would be available so that literally if you turn on your computer, which everybody will be doing, or your iPhone or your cell phone, the image of the beast will come up, and you'll see it electronically, and I'll be worshiping it, and it'll appear to speak and be able to talk, even though it's not that person. And again, we have that technology. There's actually a couple of great examples we have is one is, I don't know if you've watched Star Wars movies at all.
I have, but I'm not super literate at it. I kind of sometimes fall asleep.
Well,
during all movies.
Carrie Fisher. Carrie Fisher was a part of the ninth movie, what they call now the ninth movie, when they were filming it, but she died.
I did see this. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
And so what they did is they took imagery of her and put it into the movie. It wasn't actually her because she was dead. So they weren't filming her. They're filming an image of her as if she was alive. And so you you can, if you look at it real close, you can kind of tell a little bit of the difference. It wasn't it wasn't perfect, but it was pretty good. And the average person
incredible technology is there.
Technology is, I can create that image. Interesting enough, I can take even the speech that I've recorded and now tie things together. So her voice, and she wasn't speaking those lines because she was dead. But they took words that she had spoken over time and being able to create the language, for it. So it appeared like they could do it. So the false prophet, what's called the false prophet, is promoting the aspect of worship the beast, and the beast can talk and say things even though it's really not him because it's an image of him, and everybody recognizes it. And he says, as many as don't worship the beast, they're killed. They can be killed. So again, who's not going to worship the beast?
The remnant.
So it doesn't say everybody, but there will be people who said, I'm not doing that.
Right.
And they're going to wind up, getting killed. And of course, we'll have to talk about that. But he says he causes all throughout the world to receive the mark on the right hand of their forehead. Remember, that's what we talked about is John's observing that. So it looks like it's on their forehead or on their wrist. So he said that must be where the mark is, because he can see that happens. And that in verse 17, what? No one can buy or sell unless you have the mark of the beast.
Right.
And that's the economic system we just talked about that they've just set up in Canada, that unless you have that mark, you can't travel, you can't buy things. Right. That's the way the system looks and operates.
And this is why there are, a number of Christians who are preparing in terms of community. Who do I have around me, and just already thinking forward to there may come a time in our lifetime that we need to be able to function as an economic unit aside from what the rest of the world is doing.
Right.
And setting up that network already.
Right. So that as you look at the player that, the Antichrist gets into power, along comes the false prophet who appears to be Christian, doesn't interesting enough, doesn't promote pure Christianity, and has morphed it into something else, but they're speaking it from I'm a believer and this is good. And
an influential one.
So,
that's someone who has a pretty good sphere of influence through the world, not just locally, but through the world, that would be recognized.
And somebody that is recognizable, that says, this is right, this is good, this is, and again, as we finish this segment right now, is as a Christian, why would you ever buy that? What has happened to you that you would ever buy that? And say, I guess.
Well, if you're not walking with God and listening to Him, it's easy to fall into deceit, and certainly easy to fall under the idols of comfort and convenience and security and provision and just assuming I have to go along with a system to do that, living on earth.
Yeah, and what have you not learned to do? And that is to be driven and led by the truth of the Word.
Right.
And I've lost that element of it. And so
it really comes back to abiding.
Yeah, and so there's no standard for understanding truth. And now whoever speaks this out says it is truth, but I don't know that it's not truth. See, why? Well, because I'm not a great follower of the Scriptures, even believing that the Scripture is even true all by itself. And we're seeing that culturally. Like for example, gay marriage is being sanctioned by church leaders because God is love, but it's complete opposite of what the Scriptures say.
Right.
And again, Christ goes into how to deal with that, because there is still love and how He values people, but He doesn't sanction certain things that aren't so.
Right.
And always says, leads us to truth. So this will be an interesting thing as we process this further about the mark of the beast and the implication of the mark of the beast. But now there's a big player alongside of the Antichrist, and it's called the false prophet. And we have to, understand all that. So we'll pick that up again next time. But interesting enough, what we just read and understood this week is that mark is literally being put in place in a certain way. So it's really interesting stuff.
Yeah, certainly being set up with the technology and just the requirements that are coming in.
Yeah. So we'll
very interesting. So thanks for sharing all of that. I love hearing you do a deeper dive into this than I often do, and so it's great to just have that wisdom, and I know our audience appreciates it as well. So thank you for joining us, everyone. If you have any questions this raises, send them into us at questions@afjministry.com, and let's get them on here.
All right.
Meanwhile, have a fantastic weekend, and we'll see you Monday.
Yep, we'll see you then.
Thank you for joining us for today's episode of Come and See, your podcast for truth in a world of chaos. Brought to you by All for Jesus Living Waters Ministry. Send us your questions and comments, And tune in tomorrow for more answers to your personal questions about living life in God's truth. Remember, God's will is best and none better. His truth brings peace in this world of chaos.